The next speaker then is Steve Schmidt, who is currently the Regional Supervisor of the Upper Snake River region of Idaho Department of Game and Fish, Regional Habitat Manager in this area for 12 years, 20 plus years with the Idaho Fish and Game, and before that 6.5 years in Kansas Department of Fish and Game. And Steve will be talking about the group that has been formed in southeastern Idaho, very similar to what Jenny just talked about, but a very interesting group, and let Steve tell you about it.
Again, I'm with the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, and I'm going to briefly give you the history of the Eastern Idaho Aspen Working Group from the perspective of Idaho Fish and Game employee. This is really more than just the story of the Eastern Idaho Aspen Working Group. It's also the story about how a blissfully ignorant state employee became a disciple of the Aspen movement. So it is the story kind of comes together a few years ago when several events merged. One of those events was the Idaho Department of Fish and Game began a new effort to shift resources over toward more effective management to try to respond to a declining mule deer population. And very briefly, the purpose of that mule deer initiative was to improve mule deer numbers and increase hunter satisfaction and protect and improve habitat. And our research in Idaho Fish and Game had indicated that aspen communities were proving to be very valuable where they existed for mule deer, and that those does that dropped their fawns in aspen communities were more likely to recruit those fawns into the population. So it was about that same time also that I started attending some of these aspen symposiums. Dr. Bartos was there. I think I've heard him speak several times now. And I was blissfully ignorant of the aspen issue until I attended those workshops. But being as my entire career has been in management, I heard what the researchers said, and I felt that they had spoken, and now it was time to take what they had found in research and apply it to management. So with the impetus of the Mule Deer Initiative and our concerns about declining aspen and our newfound understanding of the importance of aspen and its decline, we began to be more active in aspen management issues. And I say that with a little bit of embarrassment because we should have been more active prior to then, but because aspen is very important to many species of wildlife. Unfortunately, it kind of took the Mule Deer Initiative to give us that kick in the pants to get going and be more aggressive in this issue. Our director is very fond of espousing the importance of relationships, and he repeats that fairly often. And when he's not around, and I don't think he's around today, we often joke about that a little bit, and sometimes I get a little tense in the office and get a little frustrated with the decisions made on high, and my staff like to remind me that according to our director, it's all about relationships. And he's right. He's right. And if we're going to apply the information that research has shown us towards effective management, we've got to work on those relationships. So we approach this issue under that premise. And we started by having conversations with the Forest Service, and we were asking them how do we get more aspen projects on the ground. And we quickly discovered that there were two principal reasons why more projects weren't being completed. One is lack of funds, and the other was a trust issue. Unfortunately, there were some non-government organizations out there that didn't trust the Forest Service, and the Forest Service didn't trust some of the non-government organizations, and nobody trusted Fish and Game. So we had to start working on those relationships. So we had a number of preliminary meetings to talk about issues and problems, and eventually we developed a strategy that where the Forest Service and Fish and Game took the lead at forming a partnership between the Forest Service, Fish and Game, BLM, Idaho Department of Lands, and Idaho Department of Agriculture. And we wanted to formalize our new working relationship, our new partnership, with some sort of a document. And we settled upon a letter of agreement. And we made a big media event, as big as we could, on Arbor Day this year. And on Arbor Day this year, all these agencies came together and signed that letter of agreement with our intent to work together towards more effective aspen management. In that agreement, we determined we were going to provide more effective management to halt the decline of aspen. We were going to work towards maintaining or enhancing biodiversity. We were going to try to coordinate our activities more closely. Obviously, we wanted to partner together and build project proposals and collaborate to build trust and support. And finally, the letter of agreement called for the formation of the Eastern Idaho Working Group. Rather than just pull together a bunch of people and build a charter from scratch, which we had done several years ago when we formed the Upper Snake Sage Grouse Local Working Group, we decided this time to develop a draft charter before we took this out to the public. And I think that's significant in that it saved us a lot of time and effort. With the Sage Grouse Working Group, by starting from ground zero, it took us an awful long time to get to the point that we had common goals and a charter worked out. By preparing the draft charter, I think that sped the process up a great deal. So several of the entities involved got together and prepared a draft charter, and that was in place before we opened the working group up. The purpose of that charter was to increase public understanding of values of aspen communities, increase understanding of current trends in those aspen communities, increase public understanding of the consequences of the loss of aspen communities, promote and perpetuate sustainable, diverse aspen communities, develop partnerships and share our resources across administrative boundaries, use collaboration to solve problems, and generate new funding sources to conserve aspen communities. Our hope is that as we get our feet on the ground and get more active, that collectively we can go to our congressional representatives and seek federal funds for more projects on the ground, and seek grants and be more effective at receiving those grants because of the partnerships that we have developed. And finally, we want to provide a forum to share information and the results of those projects. So how is our group organized? Well, first of all, it's open to anybody and everybody that has an interest in aspen management. And they can join anytime, where there's no deadline to join. People will come and go. We understand that. They can join us at any time. We do, however, again, to try to facilitate an effective decision-making mechanism, we ask that the new members accept our charter. We're going to try to operate via consensus and come to decisions as much as possible on a consensus basis, but that our fallback position is a majority vote. We will require that in order for participants to be involved in decision-making processes, that they attend at least 2 meetings. So we've had a number of meetings since Arbor Day, and a lot of thoughtful discussions. And another, I think, important aspect of how we formed our working group was we understood that it could not be any one agency's working group. It could not be Fish and Game's working group. It could not be the Forest Service's working group. If we were going to have the credibility and support that we needed, we need to have an unbiased facilitator that helped us form the group and conduct the meetings. And so we hired a facilitator that we had all had some experience with in Idaho Falls, and she's done a great job at helping us get started, get our feet on the ground. Through her efforts, we now have defined our functions as a working group. We want to gain better understanding of the values and threats and trends of Aspen. Our intent is to review and comment on proposed projects. And the way that unfolds is a Forest Service district, for example, may bring their Aspen project, proposed project, while they're in the development stages to the Aspen working group and present a proposal to the working group. And collectively, we help them build better projects. The group, we hope at some point in the future, will evolve to the point where we will propose new projects for agencies to implement. And we want to learn from our mistakes, and we're really looking for that critical eye from all the participants so that we can build and implement the best projects possible. We spent a lot of time talking about, well, how do we measure success? And this is what we came up with. You can tell it was developed by a committee. Reversal of the downward trend in Aspen communities in eastern Idaho by entering into partnerships to implement successful management and our projects on an increasing number of public and private acres each year. The key is developing those relationships, those partnerships. And I think we're on the road to doing that. Some of the products that we've identified that we hope to develop, a number of communications products, including newspaper articles. We've already had one field trip. We've had some presentations, developed some brochures, maps. Again, we're looking to acquire new sources of funding for all of the agencies involved and to share our resources to complete projects. We really need that public support for projects, and we're learning about the different perspectives that are out there in the public and understanding people's concerns, and we're going to work forward to help alleviate people's concerns. And eventually, we also see the working group writing letters of support to a specific agency in support of projects that they have on the table. We intend to work at a landscape scale and across multiple ownerships. Our funding, primarily the only cost we have right now is the facilitator, but we are splitting the cost of the facilitator between 3 agencies. The National Forest is taking 37.5% and Fish and Game 37.5%, and BLM is paying for 25% of those costs. As I said, we've had at least one meeting, and you can see we included 2 of the prophets of the Aspen issue at our last meeting. Dave Burton and Dale Bartos again were very instrumental in helping us explain this issue to folks, and it's been very interesting for me to hear the feedback from that one field trip, and again hearing all the different perspectives. Dale, I have to tell you that we haven't made believers out of all of them, but we're working on it, okay? But I believe, okay? I'm a disciple. So that's the end of my presentation. I thought I would include one slide of Aspen in Idaho so that you could see that Aspen probably has a prettier Aspen than either Utah or Colorado. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
Do you have any specific examples of a project that you influenced through your working group?
Well, again, we haven't been up and rolling too long. The Island Park Ranger District, that would be up by Henry's Lake, brought a project to us that we took apart piece by piece and gave them feedback on how they could better present it to the public, get more support from those folks in that area. You'd have to ask them how effective our input was. We're still working towards getting everybody on the same page, and that takes a great deal of time. But I think, you all know about the different levels of teams: forming, storming, norming, and performing. We're probably at that storming stage right now. They're just getting started in that storming stage. So we've got a ways to go yet before we really prove ourselves. All right, thank you.
Thank you.